Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
The only one true supernatural, magical experience I've ever had in my life. Be me, 7 or 8 years old. Living in Germany. U.S. Air Force dad, local mom. Parents decide to take a day trip to go hiking in the Black Forest. Halfway down the trail. Rest area. Parents admire the scenery, take pictures, and do touristy shit. I played with some other kids for a while. My dumbass decides to wander off into the woods. Walk about 10 minutes, find clearing. Look back and can't find the trail. Panic. Keep walking like a dumbass. Feels like hours have gone by. The forest changes. Things become still and hesitant. Like an expectation. The light changes, becomes golden and soft. Birds stop. Insects stop. A woman steps out of the woods. But not really a woman. Her skin is wood, like burnished oak. No mouth, no nose. But wide yellow eyes like owl eyes. Hair is moss. Not like moss, actual moss. Doesn't look like a woman really, it looks like a tree. But its presence was the most feminine aura I've ever felt in my life. It's peaceful and beautiful beyond description. She takes me by the hand. Her wood skin is warm and solid. Like a log that's been laying in the sun. She leads me back to the trail. I've been gone no more than 15 minutes. She pats my head and disappears into the woods. Parents ask if I had fun playing with the other kids. We moved to the States about 2 or 3 years later, and I've never been back. I've explored the woods all over the southeast US, and I've never once had any kind of experience that even comes close to that. The woods in Germany are different from the woods here in the US, they have a feeling of Waldensamkeit. I'm not sure English has such a word, but it kind of means a spiritual feeling of being alone in the forest.
Dad's friend told us about the takeover of a sacred temple in Punjab back in the 80s or so. Sikhs used to have gurus. They don't anymore apparently. The last living one basically said, "No more gurus will ever come again," and then split. But the Sikhs do have a sacred text, I forget the name of it, and people say that it's alive. Like, literally alive. They consider it the last living guru, and it sits on a throne like a king, in a temple in Amritsar. The temple is called the Golden Temple or something similar, and obviously it's a sacred place for Sikhs. Anyway, one day this dude comes along. He's an important figure for the Sikhs, a leader of an important sect that is associated with past gurus, so he commands a lot of respect. He starts getting political, demanding an independent state for Sikhs. Now this is in Punjab, so the Indian government is sort of trying to figure out what to do about this guy. Dad's friend was in the army at the time. He hears talk of possibly taking the guy out, but they're not sure if this will make things worse. They decide to sit on their hands and hope the problem goes away by itself. But instead, the Sikh guy takes over the Golden Temple. He begins recruiting people for his cause, training them in the temple, basically building a band of insurgents. There are more and more of them every day. Now, India literally can't do anything even if it wants to, because if they attack the temple it will piss off every fucking Sikh in the world. To make matters worse, the local Punjabi police is made up of a shitload of Sikhs, and they're all sympathetic to this dude's cause. Other security forces are too. Also, since this temple is where the sacred text lives, nobody wants to desecrate it. So basically this Sikh dude has managed to surround himself with allies and stationed himself within what is basically an impenetrable temple. India's hands are totally tied. But then the guy makes a mistake. He begins assassinating political enemies. There are rumors that he is doing it within the temple itself. He's desecrating a sacred site. And his insurgents have been threatening locals, killing the friends and family of political opponents, etc. This guy was the closest thing to a guru the Sikhs have had in a long time. But he sort of turns into a monster. India decides, fuck it, we have an excuse now, let's go in and get him. Now the official story is that the dude was actually killed in the fray of battle or something. But Dad's friend was there and said nobody ever even fired a shot at him. He says that the army charges the temple, taking out tons of insurgents, many of whom just flee. The main dude retreats into the innermost part of the temple. Fuck. The one thing the Indian army told itself before this battle was that it wouldn't go in there, it wouldn't desecrate that part of the temple with a battle. So for a moment everyone's kind of on pause. Then Dad's friend decides fuck this and goes in there after the guy. Some of his buddies follow, some stay behind. The ones that went in there all heard two voices as they entered. But once they were inside they only saw the one guy. Dad's friend gets instant goosebumps and stops dead in his tracks. Everyone else does too. The guy seemed to be pleading with someone but there's nobody there. He approaches the sacred text. Nobody fires a shot. They all feel frozen, like something terrible is about to happen. Something tells Dad's friend, shut your eyes. And he does. Dad's friend said he wasn't sure if he actually heard this or if it was in his head. Apparently all his buddies shut their eyes too. They hear a terrible sound like someone struggling to scream. Still, nobody fires. Everyone's too freaked out. They feel like if they move they'll die. Nobody even makes a sound. All they hear is someone struggling to scream. This continues for a while and then Dad's friend opens his eyes. He and his buddies can all move again. The goosebumps are gone. And the Sikh dude is dead at the foot of the throne with no obvious wounds or injuries.
Be me, 18, college freshman. Always had a tendency to pace a lot, still do, but my dorm was too small for that. This, paired with my insomnia, leads me to take long nightly walks. Usually from 1 to 4 a.m. I liked going that late because no one was around, since I'm very awkward around people. Sort of just wandering the side streets, listening to music, lost in thought. Kind of creepy at times, but mostly very peaceful for me. All the streets kind of looked the same, and I would intentionally try to get myself lost. Made the walks less boring, I guess. One night, deep into a walk, I notice that all the streetlights are off past a certain point. At first, I thought I had just reached the end of a street or something, but the sidewalk seemed to keep going. Decide to follow it. After walking for about a minute I notice that I can't see my own feet. I've been camping many times and even the woods in the middle of nowhere at night aren't half this dark. It's dead silent too. No wind, no distant cars, even my footsteps are sort of muffled. After walking for about 20 minutes I see a light in the distance. To be honest, I'm not sure how I missed it before. I couldn't have been more than a few hundred meters away. Seems to be a large window of a house, with someone standing in front of it. Can't make much out of it, just a silhouette standing there. As I get closer to the house, which takes much longer than it should have, the figure and the room don't become any more detailed. I'm maybe 20 feet away, and the guy still looks like a 2D cutout. Room is barren too, just a bright yellowish light behind him. No furniture, can't even tell where the walls or ceiling is. Light from the window doesn't illuminate the outside at all either. Slowly approach when the figure moves, raising his hand and grabbing a chain hanging from the ceiling. I know that wasn't there a second ago. Yanks it down and the window goes dark. Get shit scared and turn around. Start booking it. 30 seconds of running in total darkness and I'm already back to the streetlights. Haul ass home. That weekend I walked around during the day for hours, looking for where that street was. Try retracing my steps, but to no avail. I must have wandered the entire immediate area, but it wasn't anywhere. Never had another experience like that, although I usually take my walks elsewhere now. No fucking idea what that was, just know it was weird at the time.
I have several spooky stories from me or my brother, gonna post 2 of them. Be me dating a girl from Tinder. We had several dates and already kissed, so I invited her to my home. Flatmate and his girlfriend are at home. We all drink a little bit of wine. Give my flatmate a hint to piss off so I can be alone with my date, so he and his girlfriend go sleeping. As soon as we were alone, I escalated and kissed her, and we decided to move into my room. We have a sexy time, undressing, a lot of kissing and petting. She is a little bit shy and asked me if I can close the door because she was worrying that my flatmate could enter the room unexpectedly. Tell her to not worry, because he never entered my room without knocking and asking. Also, it is already 12 p.m. We continued kissing for some minutes until she froze and stared with glazing eyes behind me. I immediately turned my head around and watched in the direction she was looking and saw that someone had opened the door a few inches and was standing in the hallway behind the door. As soon as the person saw our reaction, he calmly closed the door. I was really angry and apologized to her many times because of my stupid flatmate. The night was over for us and she decided to go home, which was okay for me after this embarrassing moment. As soon as I stood up, I went to my flatmate's room and asked him friendly why he opened my room. He was like, what the fuck, he and his girlfriend would never enter my room without asking or knocking. Especially when there was a girl. This was really spooky to me in the aftermath because we both saw the open door and someone standing behind it and closing it afterwards. I also believe in my friend because our house is really old, so we would have heard someone walking in the hallway, which was not the case. Another story. This one happened some years ago when I still lived at my parents' home. Saturday. Stayed at home because I felt ill, but my brother went out partying. Wake up at around 3 a.m. As always, when my brother was partying and out with his friend, I checked his room when I woke up in the middle of the night to see if he was already at home. So I checked his room and saw him lying in his bed. His back was facing me and he had a white t-shirt on. Afterwards, I went to the toilet and to the kitchen to get a glass of water. As I walked back to my room, I saw that his keys were missing at the entrance door. We always hang our keys right next to the door. A shiver went up and down my spine as I realized that he might not be at home and someone other was laying in his bed. I went straight to the bedroom of my parents and woke them up. Together we checked his room, but no one was there. Right at this moment we heard the door opening and he entered the house. I wasn't hallucinating because nothing in his bed was white and clearly saw someone with a white shirt laying there. My brother has experienced a lot of spooky shit too.
To begin, I should explain I am half Northern Irish and half Welsh. My grandfather traced the Irish side back to when written records began coming from various Irish royal houses. This is relevant to who banshees appear to and for. My parents divorced when I was 11 or 12, my father was never around before that. Growing up, my mother and grandmother looked after us. I had always been interested in stories about our family and our history as well as those about folklore. At age 13 I was sent off to boarding school in England. The boarding house was old, it had flights of stairs at the center that were open. One term when I was 15 I was assigned a room on the opposite side of the floor to the loos. I would have to cross the stairs to get to them. One night I woke up needing to use the loo. I walked down my corridor and prepared to turn the corner to get to the door that leads to the stairs. I hear a horrific wailing scream. I've heard foxes were not foxes, they sounded like a woman. I instantly froze and it carried on for a while then subsided. Still frozen, I immediately think of Banshee based on all the stories I was told as a child. The window next to me rattles. I jump. Nothing. It was just the wind. Feel stupid, the cry must have been the wind whistling through gaps in the old window. Relieved, I decided to continue to the loo. I turn the corner and get to the door to the stairway I would have to pass to get there. There's a faint green glow coming through the safety glass window of the door. Scared but curious, I open the door, terrified, but I need the loo now more than ever. I creep along towards the loo, approaching the stairs under a faint green glow. I hear the cry again. I freeze and look at the source of the sound and see the source of the light. A woman in a long green dress / robe with a black hooded shawl is standing at the top of the stairs to the next floor. She has pale skin, long black hair, and all of it is translucent. Her dress is giving off faint green light and her skin faint white light. She is not grotesque or ugly in any way. I was looking at a banshee. I turn and run back to my room. I hid there until morning. I think nothing of the banshee and presume it was a nightmare. About a week later, it was the end of term and I fly home. I was met by my uncle and mother at the airport. I wondered why he was there but didn't say anything. We drive home in near silence. As soon as we step through the door, I am told my grandmother died a week before, but they chose to wait to tell me until I was back. I cried. I knew she was sick and dying. I just didn't expect it to come so soon. I thought I would have one more holiday with her to say goodbye. I didn't connect the two events until years later. I forgot all about the banshee. I was 18, I had left school, I was at a drinks event at a hill tomb, and I had an internship at celebrating a new exhibit opening. Talk turns to the Aos and then to the banshees. I am reminded of my sighting and tell the people I am with about it and laugh about how I must have imagined or dreamt it and about how scared it made me, and people laughed. I then mentioned that I was terrified I was going to die as the banshee heralded my death and laughed. One lady didn't laugh at this and said something that made my blood run cold, something I had forgotten or not understood about the banshee legend as a child. She told me banshees don't herald your death, they herald the death of a family member. I think I froze as my brain put it all together, and I realized that the banshee must have been there to tell me my grandmother was about to die. Popular culture about banshees is very wrong. In traditional folklore, they are not evil, they do not bring death, they merely precede it. They are not hags out to steal souls. Some say they are an ancestor of the family lamenting the loss of a descendant, or a type of Aos that watches over a particular family. I now look back on that banshee fondly. I still miss and mourn for my grandmother, but knowing her, she would be so happy and honored to know a banshee preceded her death.
My stepdad loves to tell this one story every Halloween. B. Stepdad, 17, 1978. Grow up in rural Tennessee. One of his favorite things to do is hiking, hunting, fishing, and real outdoorsman stuff. One day he and a friend of his called Billy were fixing to do a weekend-long camping trip in some woods a few miles from their homes. They left their bikes by the opening to a trail and just hauled their equipment by themselves. They set up camp after a while, finding a nearby river to possibly fish from. As they set up camp together and start a fire, Billy asks my stepdad to have a listen. Apparently for the last few hours there hadn't been any kind of noise, not even insects, but my stepdad chalks it up to their presence. Stepdad and Billy spend Friday night alone in the woods eating food cooked over a fire, shooting the shit, usual stuff teenagers in the 70s would do. Around 1 a.m. my stepdad is in the tent they'd set up earlier in the day when he hears what he for sure knows is a person. He keeps intently listening to wonder what this person is doing, but he still tries to act like he's asleep in case it's some serial killer or backwoods weirdo. Stepdad hears, "Hey Danny," in a very concerned tone of voice, almost scared even. Stepdad has no clue who the fuck Danny even is. "Danny." This voice apparently cries out in desperation again. Strange guy who's looking for Danny fucks off after a few seconds or so. Stepdad tries to sleep but struggles, thinking someone might be lost or dead. Next morning comes and he talks Billy into seeing if they could try and look for the stranger and his friend Danny. Billy agrees and they head off to the woods. Billy tells Stepdad that he's still yet to hear any animal noises, which Stepdad shrugs off. As they continue trekking through the woods looking for lost strangers, Stepdad asks Billy not to split up as that's dangerously stupid, but cover more ground by distancing themselves. Billy agrees to this and they separate by 10 feet. They separate by 10 feet. Stepdad goes deeper into some more woodland to search. He keeps sight of Billy and they frequently call out to each other to make sure they're still within reach. Stepdad keeps walking alone the woodland looking for any signs of people having been there recently. He's keeping track of any footprints or other signs of anyone. He calls out to Billy but doesn't hear back immediately. He sits still for what he guessed was 10 to 15 minutes calling out for Billy. Billy, Billy. He stops when he hears someone else calling Billy's name. The other voice calling out Billy's name scares him and he looks around his surroundings, then sees someone sitting up in a tree. Billy, Billy. This person, as he describes, had somehow been up there this entire time and had no idea how he hadn't spotted him. This person is some shade of deathly pale, wearing almost nothing, covered in lesions, open bloody sores, and what looked like pus dripping from open scab-like markings. Stepdad nervously backs away before the strange guy just drops and lands perfectly on the ground and flashes him this very wide and unnatural smile. Billy, Billy. He describes creepy guy's voice as what it'd sound like if the Wizard of Oz had taken a can opener to his vocal cords. Creepy guy catches up with Stepdad. Somehow he never fully figured out how he'd managed to be face to face with him so quickly. The creepy guy then proceeds to cup my stepdad's face into his hands with that smile still on his face. "Back off, you fool!" Stepdad yells at him before running from him. Stepdad collides into Billy soon after and tells him what happened. They see a creepy guy just standing there with his smile and they run for it. Somehow a creepy guy is keeping up with them. Stepdad decides to do the brightest thing imaginable and jump into the river. After jumping in, they relax and let the current take them away from the creepy guy. Creepy guy is still running parallel to them and cackling. Eventually they lose sight of the creepy guy. Stepdad and Billy just let the current take them out for a while before swimming back to the riverbank. By then it had been almost dusk. They reach a small campground area and climb out the river, asking one of the campers for a ride back home. Apparently the distance they'd traveled by river, they were 2 towns over from where they'd started. Stepdad never sees creepy guy again but still goes outdoors, keeps a shotgun from then on.
Since a very young age I had what kids these days would call a personal sleep paralysis demon. Except that's not what it was limited to. Its activity levels varied from day to day. Most days it wasn't noticeable. On some days it would be content watching me from somewhere in my peripheral vision, standing menacingly behind me or visiting during sleep paralysis. On rare days it would get much bolder. Would randomly stand in the middle of a room leading to me, accidentally bumping into it if I wasn't paying attention. Menacingly hang over me on all fours in bed even if I wasn't having sleep paralysis. Try pushing me in front of oncoming cars, etc. Tried chalking it up to early onset schizophrenia, but it felt far too consistent and far too real. I took to referring to it as presence, sounds less cringy in my native language. I had plenty of opportunity to get a good look at it during times when it was more corporeal, though there wasn't much to see. As silly as it sounds, the best way I can describe it is thick stickman shadow person. A featureless humanoid shape with a relatively narrow torso and relatively wide limbs.
No discernible facial features, fingers or anything really. All black, but with visual fuzz, making it appear solid in low light but semi-transparent when better lit. It also towered over me, but wasn't huge, so about 7 feet. I was around 17 at the time. My then GF used to move houses a lot as a kid. We planned a trip to visit all the places she used to live in and catch up with childhood friends. For one of the stops, we crash at one such friend's family home. Let's call her Lena. Lena's own GF is also staying over. Let's call her Maya. Maya is the nice weird kid type. Soft-spoken, always trying to make herself small and never entirely there, but surprisingly blunt. We spend some time chilling with Lena's old folks for a bit. They treat us to a few shots of homebrewed moonshine, but we are all Slavs here so nobody gets drunk. They don't have a guest bedroom, but Lena's room is massive so we all settle down there for the night. Lena has been playing some augmented reality horror game recently where certain puzzles can only be solved at specific times or after following specific instructions, so she checks on it periodically. It sparks a conversation that eventually drifts to paranormal experiences. Maya casually drops that since a very young age she had what kids these days would call a personal sleep paralysis demon. Nice. In her case, it takes the stereotypical form of the Hat Man. Interestingly, the concept of the Hat Man has not reached our sphere of pop culture at the time, so she'd awkwardly refer to it as Mr. in a Hat. His activity was limited to frequently manifesting standing in the corner of whatever room she's in, or the closest equivalent. He'd start of unnoticeable, but would grow increasingly pronounced and threatening when something he disapproves of happens. Not very consistent with his dislikes, but it's not difficult to guess what ticked him off either. Anyway, I don't share my story with them because I don't want to come off as competing in Schizo Olympics. Instead, I talk about dream interpretation and other bullshit. We eventually head to bed for the night. Sleeping on a mattress on the floor in one corner. Maya is sleeping on the bed in the other corner along the same wall. Or at least we are both trying to, but we are clearly quite restless. GF and Lena are both sleeping like rocks behind us though. The street lights outside finally go out. Sweet, now that it's darker I might finally get some sleep. I look over to Maya. She's wide awake. I freeze. It suddenly comes to me that while my mind was taken off it by socializing, presence was having one of its intense days. As my eyes adjust to the dark slightly better, I can tell that Maya's terrified eyes are glued to the opposite wall. I steady my breath and slowly turn my gaze while trying my best not to move. And sure enough, presence is standing right there in the corner. But it isn't facing me as usual, at least as much as something without a face can. It's facing the last corner. Where, I shit you not, stands Hat Man, returning its glare. Them two having a staring contest seems hilarious in retrospect, but at the moment the tension was mind-racking. I just lay there frozen, convinced that if I as much as move a muscle all hell will break loose. As painfully long moments pass, they visibly grow agitated. Presence starts to jitter and takes on a wide pose. Mr. in a Hat seems to just fucking grow in size until almost matching its height. They also slowly start inching towards each other. I could swear I heard Maya gulp as her boy slides out of his corner. They only come to a stop once close enough to almost bump chests. At which point they start producing noise. An oppressive droning buzz seems to be emanating directly from Presence's entire body, while the Hat Man is letting out an incessant cat-like hiss. I eventually pass out more so from fear than exhaustion. In the morning I speak to Maya while GF and Lena are out of the room. Did you also? Yup. Should we talk about it? Nope. So yeah, that's the story of my sleep paralysis demon having a catfight. There's been no major consequence to this, so it's a bit anticlimactic. Still, I thought it's worth sharing.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.